And I'm fighting a bit of a cold, so my voice sounds amazing. I just came from our recap. I've been filming about a 5-minute recap of the prior session. So this boils down everything we spoke about over an hour into 5 to 10 minutes. So be on the lookout for those. They publish at about 6:20, so 10 minutes before this begins. And they're shot in what's called Premiere, or they come out in Premiere. So you can do a live chat, ask your questions, and get follow-up, that kind of thing as you go. Wow. It is just going to be a fun morning for Rob here. I'll give folks just a couple of minutes to drop on in because I was a moment late. It looks like, well, some of us do watch the recaps. They're available just as regular recordings, so if you don't make them live, totally okay. They're available just hanging out on YouTube. And I'll drop a link to the prior one right here. Oh, but I'll make sure I get the right one. This one. Those are certainly not mandatory or required, but they just help. Thank you, Sarah. So far, it's just the throat feels a bit wonky. Nothing too bad. Hopefully dodging whatever is floating around. All right, folks, we're going to get started with plans. As usual, my name is Rob. Been in Atlassian since about 2013. And honestly, plans is not a feature I used all that much. I tended to get stuck just in the timeline feature. So this will be a new learning experience for me as well, which is always a good thing. But we're going to be leaning on Atlassian to help us learn them, and then, of course, our premium instance. As always, please use the chat to ask your questions, but also, if you like this, please like it. I do this professionally, and I also have a sponsor for this particular series. Check out Service Rocket right down below. Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry. I hope mine's not as bad as that. Selfishly. Check out my sponsor, Service Rocket. They've got a great crew member program for finding short-term work in the Atlassian ecosystem. But be on the lookout for polls as well, just seeing who took our recap session. The recaps are just part of what I'm providing to help y'all along on your study journey. I also have a free recap course that 75 people so far have signed up for, which is amazing. I need to go find a link real quick. And let me share that link right here. That free companion course also includes quizzes and labs to further help you kind of get this stuff down. I will remind people this study session alone is not enough for you to get everything. Atlassian recommends it's like 12 to 24 months of hands-on experience in Jira before we take an ACP. So in addition to these study sessions, you need to be studying on your own. You need to be taking the companion course. You need to be using Jira. And I'm just going to see who's using the companion course. Whoops, went too fast. Also, a quick reminder, why are you studying for this? I do this to fill out my skills gaps. I learned things that I didn't use when I was using Jira professionally, so it helps me just understand the system. And when I was using Jira, this kind of stuff helped me become a better project manager. That's my professional background. So by going in and actually taking and earning these certifications, I learned a lot more than I did on my own. Both are valuable, but make sure you know your why, because you're going to need to study. You got to put in extra effort. You're spending time with me early on a Monday, at least early for me. Hopefully not too early for all y'all. But you want to understand why you're putting in this time, effort, and energy to do this. That's going to help inspire you, motivate you, keep you going when you really want to be doing anything else, like playing video games or taking a nap or anything else, honestly. Doing the dishes sometimes is more attractive than studying. So make sure you know your why. Why are you here? So we're in the managing projects part of this exam, or maybe reporting. I don't know exactly where plans fall. But this takes up a quarter of our whole exam. It's broken into 4 chunks. I find it interesting that board configuration is such a big piece. We have entire sections on board config, but we'll be focusing specifically on Jira Plans. For those of you who came out of data center, you might have used advanced roadmaps. This is similar, if not identical, if I recall. Roadmaps refers to a different feature in cloud, so please just be aware about that. So first, what even are plans? Plans are a way to track work across spaces. Up until now, we've mostly been focused on talking about work within a space. So using a dashboard to show, reporting within a space, reports that show it within a space. Even our different views in Jira are typically constrained to a space. There is a feature similar to plans on the space level called timeline. It gives you a Gantt style chart, but plans takes that up a level and gets you pulling data across different spaces. So we think of this more in our strategic planning, and they named it plans, which makes it very hard to talk about the plans you make to go accomplish something. But plans allow us to do things like think through what does it look like across different spaces, and also to model out, to build different scenarios to see what happens if we make these changes or make those changes. Now, we'll learn later that these changes are not committed. They're not published and put onto the tickets until you hit a button. So this makes it a very useful tool in thinking things through before you commit something. Sarah really wants more people at their company to use it, and I need. There we go. I guess what's stopping them, Sarah? Because that's usually the first question. Like, we have this tool, plans, and you know how to use it to an extent. Like, why aren't other people using it? And that's more of a general admin question. So as we talk about plans, I'll encourage folks to think through how would you get other people at your organization to become interested in, or be aware of, or start to use the feature. There are three major things to think of when we think of a plan. I'm curious, who knows what the iron triangle of project management is? And I'm asking this because it came up in a meeting I had earlier. But plans have three major parts: our time, our scope, and our resources. What's the timeline we're looking at? So how far out do you want to look? Or what period of time do you want to examine? Scope, what's going to be included in it? What work items fall into the plan or don't fall into the plan? Because we can exclude them. And then what resources, what teams and people are going to be working on it? Oh, interesting. People at our company who are running projects that say we don't need to use Jira. I mean, you don't have to use Jira. You can choose not to. That's an interesting adoption challenge, Sarah. Whoops, gotta back up. So these three parts all go into our plan. Now, I'll talk more about planning for plans. We're going to jump into the demonstration box for a moment. But when we think of what goes into the plan, it's going to be what time frame, what work items, and what people will all be involved in this. Now, I've mentioned the free companion course. This QR code will take you to it. It's linked in the chat as well. It's got 10 modules, one for each week we're training. It's got quizzes. It's got other homework for you to help build your learning. Please check this out if you're looking to extend your skills and get more hands-on practice, entirely free to you. Go nuts, folks. John, good to see you. So we're going to pop in and just look at plans for a second. I believe they're available in all flavors of Jira, not of Confluence. Right over here. They can be hidden in your sidebar if you've hidden them. And I think I've got a good pre-populated plan. Now the plan looks and feels exactly like the timeline view on a space. So this is a plan. I'm going to go to my space. This is a timeline. The big difference is timelines are just in this space. So what I'm seeing here is a visualization of these work items. So this lets me see work items against a Gantt chart is the term. Now, usable just for this one space. I can do things like click and drag and adjust this, but the plans really kick in because they let me look at a longer time scale and give me a different view of this information. So this looks the same. I've got some columns with some stuff, but it lets me do things like group it by goal or reporter. Maybe I'll get rid of grouping just to see what it looks like flat. So from here, I can then go down, in this case, all of my epics and just see how they stand. There's some missing start dates. Okay, I got to go add these. There's some that maybe they're in the wrong status or have the wrong assignee. So I can interact with the work from here, and I can view it in this handy timeline. For me as a project manager, this timeline is usually what I would be looking at because most Most of my stakeholders would want to see it in a Gantt style chart, like what's the schedule, what's coming up. But I'm not limited to that. I have different views I can look at, and I can even save my views. So similar to a Confluence dashboard, if you've used that, you can set up a view with a title and then different layouts to make it easier to use. You might have one just for you. You might have one for your team. I love how they snuck this little tiny save icon in here for the save view. That's the only place I've seen this. Grouping by different kinds of work. The default was goal. So if your organization uses goals, you can also see your work in this plan based on that. There is a feature called auto scheduler we're going to talk about. But one thing you'll notice is there's unsaved changes at the top. We'll dig more into this, but this is the one spot in Jira without any add-ons where I can model out differences. So if I make changes to this, it's not going to just add the dependency. And I'll go through all this in a moment. It's going to wait for me to save this. This allows me to have a discussion with my team to sit down and say, all right, John, here's what we think we're going to do. And here's what it looks like if we make these changes. And John might go, you know what, Rob? No. Don't include the sales team. They're too busy. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So you can model it out and have a discussion, something we can't easily do in other places. We do have other tabs and plans that I'll quickly go over. Our main focus today will be on that timeline. But like a space, I get a summary, which gives me high-level information around what's in here. Like a space, I can't change what these boxes are. I can filter within them, but I can't add new things. One neat thing is this date range can be relative. I haven't seen this elsewhere. This lets me say, show me the past 2 months, show me backwards 2 months and forwards 4 weeks of work, of information, just in this summary. Or you can make it fixed, only show me the past month, the past year. So it gives me a little bit more tools to see what's going on. Morning, Kather. Good to see you. We also have a program view. The icon is the same as the board icon in a space, and this looks like a board. However, these columns represent my iterations or my sprints. So I can see this one is the 1st to the 15th of April, 15th to 29th, etc. So this lets me plan out over sprints the work that I want to happen. This is something that I can do in a space. However, it's challenging because it's a vertical list, if you recall. If I go back into mobile program real quick. Of course, it's a Kanban. Do I have any easily accessible? Maybe not. I'll add that to the recap, but comparing this to a space, my program shows me iterations going left to right instead of top to down. For me, this makes it easier to plan out where do I want to optimize sales processes here. And within these views, I can change what I'm looking at. So I could get rid of priority or status or different fields. This is useful in my mind for planning out a specific team. And when I use the term team, I'm referring to the Atlassian feature called Teams. But my view here is saying by team. Marketing doesn't have any. Sales has 27 work items I have to plan out. This lets me easily see in sprints where they can all fall. I do also just have a straight up calendar view. I personally have not used these very much. I'm going to drop a quick question. Does anyone use this particular view? I'm curious because I don't get value out of this. I get value out of the timeline where I can see things with these bars. For me, historically, the calendar hasn't been the most useful. For those who said yes, I'm just curious, what utility do you get? What is the best use case? Also, while I'm thinking about that, I do have that Discord group that's still going strong. Jump on in there and we can continue discussions like that, use case for these particular features. There is also a Teams tab. These are the teams that are included in the plan. I think it supports up to 50 teams. Is 50 or 100? It's 100. I think it's 100 teams and 50 filters. I'll go look up the specifics. But you can always add existing teams or even make new ones. I'm working on information on teams. They have changed how they worked since Data Center. When I was in Data Center, we ignored this feature. We had other options for grouping individuals. We used Active Directory to feed into groups. But if I have more teams that need to work on this particular work, or work on this particular plan, I can add them. Now, when you add a team, there's a couple interesting things. Where do their work items come from? But also their planning style. Are they Scrum or Kanban? And then you get their sprint length and their capacity. We do have some capacity management in here. So this is another place where we're going to see how many hours in a week do they get. We can pull in releases that fall into this plan, and this is based on what spaces are included. And then we get a visual dependency chart. This to me is pretty nifty. It shows me which work items have links to other work items. In this particular example, they're all blocked. So it's not the most useful thing in the world, but just showing you, instead of having to dig into the work items, we can look at this in different ways. We might say roll this up to the story level, and I roll it up to the epics. So only show me the epics that have links or blockages. Or the specific type. Again, I only have blocked in here. Or only the dependencies in a certain sprint. So just a quick orientation, but there are different ways we can view the plan. We can also do things like star it. We'll talk a bit about plan settings as we go. Not too much in the permissions. But for me, this is the main view where I'm going to be manipulating and planning out what I want to change, what I want to do in Jira. RJ, what are a few examples of where plans would be a useful tool? That is a great example. Again, plans can support one or more spaces worth of information, and plans really let me plan out, RJ. Sorry, it's going to be amusing to say that quite a bit. For me, plans are useful at the 1 to 6 month time horizon. I'm considering what do I want to do in the next quarter worth of work. I can jump into a plan and see that. So it lets me do that easily, especially when I have multiple spaces. I can have multiple spaces in a single board, but typically a board is only giving me either a Kanban view, so the continual progressional improvement, or one iteration. So the time frame is much smaller. Also, the planning feature is really useful in my mind. I can game out, I can test out what happens if I do this and this and this. Hey team, do we like this? Whereas in a board, in a space, if I do that, I'm actually committing changes to the work item. I'm changing the due dates on the work item, and that might not be what the team wants. So those for me are the two biggest advantages. I'm curious what other folks find of using plans though. Eric, when I jump back in, we'll try that out to see what happens with multiple teams per epic. All right, folks, I'm going to get some more coffee. Oh no, I'm picking up is that Midwestern? Yikes. Oh good, I see someone picked up the free content, or free companion course. Just a quick reminder, I do this professionally, so I have found a sponsor for this particular series in Service Rocket's crew member program. I am a crew member. I do this. It allowed me to quit my full-time job. So the best way to support me is hit the like button, but also check out our sponsor. Just go take a look at them. They've got a newsletter with more information. Feel free to sign up or not, but that's the best way to show support so I can keep doing this. John, sprint capacity management. Love that. Sarah, various functional areas that carry out parts of a machine order. Plans give visibility over all functional areas. In my experience, the work I have done is typically contained in one space, and so that made it much easier to not use plans. However, as Sarah is suggesting, if you've got different groups working in different spaces, you need one spot where you can see the totality of work. This helps solve for that because you see it all on one screen, all on one space. Terminology is going to get really confusing, folks. I'll try and keep it clean. Let's see. Most of us aren't using the calendar view in Jira, which is fair. Now, when we think of plans and like any platform or system, keep in mind that we should be planning out what do we want to put on there? How do we want to use it? I mentioned earlier we've got time, scope, resources. We want to consider those questions as well. When we start a plan in Jira, what timeline are we looking at? What else are we using? RJ, love this question. Plans in quotes, yes, are intended as a project management tool. If we think of project management, we've got projects, right, which a project manager works on, and they're the fixed duration, make a unique thing. Projects could be collected into a program, a group of interrelated work. This would be between those layers or at the program layer. You can use a plan in Jira to look at a single space, a single project's worth of work, but it gets more utility when you have multiple spaces together moving towards a common thing. So definitely yes to the project management. It depends on the functionality you need, RJ, in terms of the native spaces. Oh, then I won't go too deep down this rabbit hole, but are you referring to a space within Jira or Atlassian's projects feature? These are now two separate things, just to really confuse our terminology. So when we consider starting a plan, we need to consider what are we going to include as work? And what are we going to exclude? Are there certain teams or work types or whatever do we want to get rid of or not have in the plan? And there are arguments to exclude certain types of work. And then permissions, who can see it, who can interact with it. Like every system, we want to take time to think this through. RJ, that is a great question. I'll make a note to myself to do some kind of follow-up video. I personally haven't used the project features all that much. So let me go see what I can learn about that. Limitations. Team managed space fields can't be included. So if your organization is using a team managed space, the unique fields in that space can't be put into the plan. And the same is true for team managed statuses or work types. So if you've built out a lot of team managed spaces and using a lot of things in there, that information won't be able to pull into the plan. So please keep that in mind when you're considering this. And if you're using team managed spaces, it's annoying that this doesn't work. Although I guess the counter argument is if you need a feature like plans, you're using company managed spaces because you need more complexity. But please just be aware as you're building your plans, you won't be able to include space fields from these team managed spaces. The work items can be pulled in. It's just the statuses, work types can't be used to exclude work items, and any unique fields in that space can't be used in the plan itself. There is an auto-scheduling feature that I haven't used, mainly because in my demo there's some missing data, but it can take a look at all of your work and then try to plan things out to meet a schedule. So it uses machine learning and algorithms and all those fun buzzwords around technology based on the dates and resource availability to figure out when should things happen. So this is another good use case for this. As work gets more complex, it gets harder and harder and harder for a human to figure out when should stuff happen. How do we plan things out? How do we make things fit into that schedule? So the machine can help us do all that. Mitch has another good one, or Michelin, I'm sorry, I didn't see that whole name in there. I'll just use your full username, Michelin Gentry, there we go. The multi-team dependency, so that dependencies view we saw also isn't available anywhere else that I'm aware of. You'll have to kind of crawl through tickets to find it, but Plans gives it to you in one spot. Now I mentioned changes and modeling out different scenarios or options. We can do this in a plan nowhere else, but they don't get committed, right? So this is another big advantage. And I mentioned a lot, we can do this and then have discussions and talk to people and play out different scenarios. I learned how to use Microsoft Project back in the day, and you could have multiple different scenarios at a time. As far as I can tell with Plans, you get one, but it still lets you figure out what does it look like if. If John goes in there and makes a plan, what does it look like? Is that what we want? Oh, he forgot about this worker. Oh, he remembered that this team was unavailable. That's a great call. And then we can push go. John's got a great point. Who is in charge? I'll talk about this. Do I have one more slide? I do not. That would go into my planning, John. And this is where, to your point, it can be political. It depends on your organization. But if you're helping manage work across multiple teams, you as the project manager or whatever your role is need to figure out who's going to be pushing the buttons in the plan. And I've kind of glossed over permissions. I don't want to do that yet. I want to do this. But if we go up under plan settings, we can prevent users from making changes. So if you have permissions to make a plan, you can then say, you know what, I don't want to let other people edit it. This to me should be a discussion, right? In general, for me, systems should be as permissive as possible until someone starts to not go with the rules. But to John's point, part of our planning for how will we use this feature is going to be, who's going to be doing what and where. To John's point as well, if someone comes in here and they modify the plan and commit the change, it will be made in those tickets. They might not have the authority or position to make those changes. So it's an interesting give and take, John. And I'll ask around and see if folks have better guidance on how to approach that challenge beyond just having a lot of different discussions. All right, I'm going to cut over to Atlassian's official documentation. I will share this link. And I'm going to use this just to make sure we don't miss anything. And this is why I started these study sessions. It was a selfish push for me to learn. And then all of you decided to join me, which is amazing. I'm going to start prepping for free. And then is it under configure? I think it's hiding under configure. Visual work across teams with plans in Jira. I love how even they can't keep the terminology straight. A team is a very specific thing in Atlassian. All right. I won't go through all of this. I'm going to gloss through pieces of it because we've spoken about it. But creating a plan, we'll start with just making a new plan. So going back into Jira, I'll just click the little plus. This wizard will look very similar to making a space. It's just like basically the same screen. I'll call this like the ACP-620 plan. What kind of access, restricted or open, and then what work do we include? So we can pull in entire spaces. We can pull in a specific board, or we can pull in just a filter. And this goes back to our planning, like what do we want to include? I guess the things to consider are underlying permissions. So if the people you want to look at this can't see the MP board, they won't see the work items. But for this example, I'll just include the MP program, maybe one other space just to give us some mobile platform. Just some variety, some 2 different spaces. Then we'll go add in the teams. And you'll see right here it says program board for quarterly planning. So that's more what they're looking at, that program board, which gives us the iteration view for that quarterly view, the 3-month time horizon. Teams also let us plan out capacity. So I'll just grab some teams, AWS support, sure, my front-end wizards, and then I can link them to specific spaces or other work in here. That is a great question, John. Let's pop back to our official documentation so I don't say anything that is wrong. Sources, you can update scope, prevent timeouts, 5,000 work items, 100 spaces, 50 shared items, or 50 shared teams. Okay, good limits to know. One thing to note, these are soft caps. You can go over those limits, but it might work really slowly. Also, if you get to this limit, it's a good indication maybe you should split the plan in half and find a different way to consider your work that isn't one gigantic plan. Or consider a different tool, Jira Align, for example, to meet that need. Creating work items within the plan, that doesn't help us. Let's just do a command find. Well, I don't have a good answer for that off the top of my head, John. I will see if I can go track that down for you. Back to our plan. All right, I'll go next. Okay, a default timeline view, basic, capacity, top level, dependencies. I'm going to start with a basic, and then we'll just tinker with it as we go. The default timeline view can be changed. If you think back, and when we go see this again, there's different configurations we have. Changing our columns, all the stuff we're doing right now, we can modify later. So like all of these wizards, this is just a starting point. Once we get live, though, we can go in and adjust. Invite people. Okay, great. So the actual mechanical process of making a plan is very straightforward. Select your work, select your team, select your columns, you're done. It's the planning that goes into it and considering what should be in here and understanding why it should be in there. But now I have a plan. And this is where I can add or remove those columns. All right, making work in plans. So we can insert work directly in the plan. I think that's count as an unsaved change. Ooh, I don't want an epic. I want a feature. There we go. Yes. Good. It's counted as an unsaved change. Oh, John's got a good point. This used to be called advanced roadmaps. At least I believe that was the name in data center. Again, roadmap is a different feature in cloud now. It refers to Jira Product Discovery or JPD. So we're talking about plans. Hopefully they fix this in the jump to cloud, John. But I haven't seen that. If I switch to my program view, I'll create the board. I'll give it some name, Q1 F year 26. I want 2-week columns. So this is just showing me 2-week chunks of time. Does sprint show up in here? No. Okay. I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, my friend, but I'll see what I can figure out. We can add work within a plan, as we just saw, but it'll show up as an unsaved change. So keep that in mind. Pretty much everything in there. Ooh, Mitch and Gentry, thank you for the assist there. Data source must be board to show the sprints. Okay, here we are. Sprint. NA. This field is not used in this space. Okay, that doesn't help me. Here we go. Okay, what is this little... To apply work, review and save changes. Okay. So it appears I'm able to add a sprint column and then modify the sprint for mobile program, even though I included the space, not the board. So I don't know if that gets to what we're discussing here, but it seems like I can add sprint. On the top, sprints don't exist in the space, so it's NA not applicable. But at the bottom, I can. John, you might be crazy, just not because of that. Okay, we mentioned some limitations with team managed spaces. Important to keep in mind practically, I don't know how much this shows up on the exam. They typically focus on company managed, but fields in a team managed space can't be included. Global fields by Jira admins can be. So generally custom fields, you got to know if they come from a team space or not. Work items in team managed spaces can only have a parent epic from the same space, and you can't have additional levels above. So if you have an initiative above epic or something above epic, you won't be able to pull it in if it's in a team managed space. And then statuses and work types cannot be used to exclude work. So just 3 important limitations we just need to know. Possible it shows up on the 620. So be on the lookout for questions around team managed spaces and how those interact with different things. All right. Adding team members. Again, Teams is a separate feature. I'll put together a video or something on Teams just because I don't understand them very well. But we can add existing ones or create new ones to help manage our work. One thing to keep in mind about Teams is it's possible for anyone just to go and make one. Your org admins can make what's called a verified team that has a blue check mark. That at least tells you an org admin made it and hopefully is an official team instead of something that just some rando at your company happened to go make. So if you're using Teams, just keep in mind or make sure you know which ones you want to be using. And then a planning style. This is where we're stuck with Kanban or Scrum. Again, Kanban doesn't use story points or iterations in the same way Scrum does. It's more focused on workflow and throughput. Scrum uses the estimates on story points. If you plan estimates and story points, you can only use a Scrum team. Huh, interesting. Also, as a reminder, all this free learning has these quizzes at the bottom. This is a great resource. These questions are similar to what you will see on the exam, both in terms of complexity and in terms of what they're asking. So I won't do these live, but definitely a good idea to come in here. And I randomly guessed right. I love it. If you do this, make sure you read the justification, even if you got it wrong or even if you got it right, because this will help explain why you were correct. All right. Auto scheduling. I didn't use this when I was a project manager. I would have loved to have used this. because I would spend a lot of time trying to the puzzle of how to everything fit together. Based on these dates and this limitation, where do I put these tasks? So there is an auto scheduler feature we have. It takes whatever you've configured and then recommends a schedule. So we're going to go click on this and see if it will work. I think it will yell at me because I don't have... Let me get rid of all these first. Boop. Discard changes. I do not want those. Let me go back to my example plan I was showing. I might not be able to demonstrate this because all work items have to have date fields. And if we flip back to our list view, how many don't have dates? Let's quickly just, you and you. Try that button again. Nuts. So this is one limitation of this as I was learning it. You have to have, dates show up in here. This is a good and bad thing. It's good because it forces you to update your data and you will find, weaknesses. Our team isn't properly updating tickets. It's bad because you'll have to do what I'm doing, which is quickly just make sure there's dates and everything to use the feature. However, if you have a tight process and you're reviewing things and you actually have dates on all your work items, I won't waste our time digging through this. I will make a note to do a follow-up, auto scheduler. I'll see if I can include this in our recap, so make sure you catch that video. It'll come out again just before next week's session. But this allows you to automatically have everything scheduled out in a way that fits based on limitations you provide it. Keep in mind it can overwrite the sprint, release, and team fields if you want. So you can have the system suggest those three values or not. But important information on how this thing works. Now, depending on if you're using story points or time, it can behave differently. If you're using iterations or continuous flow, basically if you're on Scrum or Kanban. If you have sprints planned out, it uses the ranking of work as like a priority. Again, the higher up something is in your backlog, in your board, the sooner it should get done, the closer to the top. So the ranking is really important. If there are dependencies between work items, and then the start and due dates. So these are all things that I as a human would do, and many project management tools help me do this. But this just does it for me. Again, it makes assumptions based on data. This can be beneficial because I as a human may not see that information the same way, or I might miss things, but it can also be just flat out wrong based on things it doesn't understand. So treat this tool like any tool you have as something that helps get you there or helps you understand what's going on. Like I say with Rovo, this is not magic. This is just a lot of complex math, and I'm really bad at math, so I'm glad it's here. You can change what date fields are used. So just as a heads up to the admins out there, the default are start and end dates. You may have other fields that you use for those dates. You can do that. And then some other settings we've got. How do we estimate days, hours, story points? Let's go see if we can find this right here. Plan settings. Oh, nope. Plan settings. I lied. I'll read through these and we'll go back. The length of a sprint. Typically 1 to 4 weeks for a Scrum team. Kanban teams, as you can see, don't have sprints. They just don't use them. And then capacity. How much capacity does each team have? We saw that when we added a new team. How many hours do they work on as a team? Here's my auto scheduler settings. And this is where I can allow it to overwrite. So the default, as we can see, it's not going to overwrite existing data, only adding data to empty fields, excuse me. Do you use the auto? I'm going to drop a quick poll in here because I haven't done that in a while. Just curious if folks would use this. The auto scheduler, that kind of tool. But I can set, what will it overwrite? Again, entirely up to you. Just be aware if you set it to overwrite, it will actually do that. It'll do the thing. And then under estimating and scheduling, I can set what is the estimation metric I'm using. Again, entirely up to each individual team. Is it going to be by story point or time, days or hours? And then I've got the start date. And it's warning me it's not available on everything, so I'll just use start date. There we go. So there's a little bit more setup we need to jump into here, or at least be aware of. As you saw, this didn't warn me earlier that target start is not available in all spaces. I had to come into settings. So maybe just a reminder to us as we're using plans to come into the settings and just look through everything to make sure, do we have a start date or not? Oh, I like this. Dependent work items can be scheduled to the same iteration. The assumption is if something is depending on other work, it shouldn't be in the same sprint or iteration. Generally a safe assumption in my mind, but we can override that here. All right. Auto scheduler can't schedule work that doesn't have a story point or time estimate to last the entirety of their assigned sprint. It will schedule work items that don't have a story point or time estimate to last the entirety. Oh, interesting. This is saying if you don't have a time or story point estimate, it will assume it takes the entire sprint or version to do the work. So this is an important thing that we need to know about. It's just assuming, hey, if Kythra didn't put a story point estimate on this work item, it's going to take the full 2 weeks. This could be a surprise. This is in a little white box on the learning as well, so this might pop up on the exam. If it did, I definitely got this question wrong, or I guessed blindly. But just an important thing to know, if there's no story point or time estimate, it will take up the whole iteration. All right, this first sentence is important. The auto scheduler does not change data until you accept the changes it proposes. So we see this in that big button at the top. When we go back to our plan, proposed changes or unsaved changes. And here you can see I have a lot because I added all those start dates. The auto scheduler behaves the same. It won't do anything until we tell it. Excuse me. I can see we've got an even split between the yeses and the for the auto scheduler and a whole bunch of no's. Okay, fair. Yeah, I have not been in environments where I would have really used this. There's been a couple cases where it would have been great to have. Just given the amount of time that people wanted me to go through and map out, like, how's this all going to change? But if you have to do a lot of really hardcore scheduling, tools like this can be very useful. Yep, we talked about overriding. All right, we can add sprint release team fields to our timeline to understand the proposed schedule. Okay, interesting they're not automatically included. I'll go back real quick. So the sprint, version, and other field just aren't by default exposed. Michelin, using autoschedule to create a baseline for pie planning. Are you a mathematician? Then we, the team, makes adjustments before committing. I like that. So you kind of tee up what's your plan going to be by using the tool, and then you all have a discussion over the best way to do it. That, for me, is how I tend to use most tools like this. For example, Rovo. I'll use it to get me 60% of the way there, and then I get it over the finish line, with my team or by myself. But I typically don't rely exclusively on automated tools or tools like this, just because I want to check and make sure, hey, is this doing what I'm expecting in a way that I would like. There's an example here. I won't dig through that. And again, for our recap, I'll try and get the autoscheduler to work. I just don't want to waste all of your time going through all of the dates on my fields. All right, dependencies. These are the links between work items. I try to use these, but typically the groups I'm working with don't care about them, so we end up not using them all that much. The timeline view has a nice way to do this. You can just click Add Dependency. If you open up a work item, this is done by linking the work item. So I'll click plus, I'll click Link Work Item, and I'll say this is, this blocks JB8, or whatever the relationship is. Those dependencies then appear visually here. But here I can just click the plus. This is blocked by, I'll say Leo43. And I'm picking that one because I see it right here. And it'll give me this nice squiggly line that visually shows me these two are related. Thank you, Michelin. I appreciate you defining the acronym. I always appreciated how the E in safe is lowercase. I understand why it is, but every time I see that acronym spelled out that way, I was like, why did the E get the short end? What Michelin is talking about in chat is, sorry, Michelin Gentry, I said I would use your full username so I don't get your name wrong. When we think of Agile, we tend to think of it at a single project level, but when you start to think of it across an organization, it's called scaled Agile. There's different frameworks, but SAFe, the scaled Agile framework, is one way to look at this. It's how do you apply Agile across an organization or a large area of one instead of just within a single team. That requires slightly different types of tools like plans to help it do that. Atlassian has another tool called Jira Align, which is even higher up on the strategic viewpoint that helps handle it specifically for SAFe. Am I supposed to pronounce the E differently, Michelin Gentry, like safe? Is it just peter off? Back to our regularly scheduled program. We can visually see these dependencies and then click on them to see what they are. I like this view a lot better for building dependencies because I can then just say, you know what, this one blocks that one somehow. You can just click and drag. So I can visually see as I'm digging through my epics or digging through specific work items how I want to do this. Depending on your organization, dependency mapping may or may not be important. But for my sanity, I would try to do it, especially for the bigger ticket items. If something is really blocking something else, I want to make sure I can see it and that it's documented on the work item, at least so we know what's going on. Excuse me. They're also called a linked. It's linking a work item is the other term. Pronounced safe. Thank you. If you create a dependency in a plan, you'll see it as a linked work item. This is just an important terminology thing. This does not bother me too much, but they call it basically two different things. All right, dependencies go in two directions. So you'll see this a lot when you link work items. But if I open up Leo44 and I link it to another work item, and I say blocks, MC44 will have another linkage that says blocked by. So very quickly, it is blocked by Leo44, and Leo44 blocks MC44. Oh, hey, we got the numbers to line up. So that's the incoming and outgoing. So that relationship is dependent on how these interrelate. Your Jira admin can add dependencies. So if you need more, they can go in and at the instance level, add more dependencies. Someone's kind of going back and forth on if they would. Oh no, we got to know. More examples here. Again, I won't waste our time going through it. Work items can have multiple dependencies. So just be aware, you can see here, there are two that relate to this one, and this one is impacting two other work items. It all depends on your planning, and that's where we can visually see it here. This view also shows up on the space level. If we go to the board and change this to timeline, we can also do something very similar by clicking on these little dots. And now I can see a relationship, a dependency between these two things. So this feature also exists at the space level under timeline. But I also like it here at the timeline view on the plan because you can see it across a lot of different work. It can be overwhelming, so that's why we have the dependencies tab. Oh, and I can see it yelling at me. The dates overlap. Oh no. This is another good just visual cue while we're here. This is because I just put in a start date that's 2 years after the end date, or vice versa. It's just visually warning me, hey Rob, you might have made a mistake here, or there's something really, really wrong with your project. We covered creating dependencies. We can add more. And then the dependencies report. Again, it lets us see only work items that have these dependencies. And then we can filter down by it, by sprint, by work item. Oh, there's a fun UI bug. Go away. There we go. Or link type. This is useful if you aren't the only one doing the planning. Ideally, other people on your team are making connections between work items and linking them. And this is where you can keep an eye on how do they all relate. As projects get bigger, they get more complex. In my experience using Jira, it was typically much simpler, but this would have made it a heck of a lot easier to figure out how all this stuff connects and where I should be focusing my time. All right, so those are dependencies. I have just enough time to get through releases. Oh, not the quiz. Come back. Releases are a bigger version of a sprint. This is an oversimplification, and someone's going to yell at me because that's not how they're defined. But I think of a sprint as 1 to 4 weeks and a release as like 3 to 6 months of work. They can also be planned out and added within the plan. You'll see them as these dots that show up along the top of our timeline. And of course, I don't have any in this one. Well, nope. All right, I'll use a screenshot. Right here, we can see that a release is planned. This helps with visual planning because I know it's there. And then as I think through the times of everything, I can back those into this little dot. This is reminding me, hey, a big thing is coming up. You, Rob, should be doing something about that. Now, releases are something that we as space admins typically can do. We covered that earlier on. We had something on components, labels, and releases as a way to organize work. We can put a lot more information on them, though. So definitely worth checking out that recap to see what we missed. But they do have to have dates, the start and release dates. So as we saw earlier with like my ability to not use auto-scheduling, our releases are also impacted by data on them. So please keep in mind that what we see in the plan is dictated by what data is available on our work items. And as you use the plan, you will start to find weaknesses in those work items, missing dates, as you're seeing in my experience, that we should really go in and look at. Now, there are cross-spaced releases. This one, let's go back in here real quick. Nothing more to add. Where did I see that? Am I blind? There we go. There were no releases there. Whew. And the releases tab was missing because there were no releases. Ooh, I like that trick. Because you don't have sprints, you use releases. What I like about that is most people think of a release as it has to be this, defined timeline. It's just a tool. And if it can work to support what your team does, use it. Just be, as I do that, I just make sure everyone knows how I define things or how I intend to use them. All right, parting shot or last thought before we jump into our last slide. Here we can have cross-space releases, data across multiple spaces. Typically, a release lives in one and only one space, but here I can link multiple spaces to a single release. I don't have any, of course. No, someone's got to have one. Aha. Not the best example because I only have one space, but I can then track progress across different releases in here. All right, that was honestly kind of an introduction to plans, just the basics. I'll have more information on plans because I feel like they are a very useful tool in the right circumstance. We had some good questions over like, why would you even use these? Kyther, I'd be curious to see what you can run with from that. A couple final thoughts. I need your help. Always looking for your feedback. Help me understand how I can make these better for you. Some examples of what has come out of this. The recaps that I publish right before these sessions were part of feedback. It's a way to help you remember what we've done. And the free companion course is also out of feedback. We want quizzes. We want homework. You asked and you got it. Hopefully you find it useful. But if you have a moment, this goes to a Google form. It can be completely anonymous. But I want to know what you think of these sessions and how they can be better. I can't promise I'll do everything you ask for, but I'll read it and I'll consider it at the very least. And most of the time, I'll pull in a lot of it. Also, shout out to my sponsor. They make sure I can do this and, still pay the bills. Please check out Service Rocket's crew member program. I'll drop the link again. They also have a newsletter that I heard is pretty good. Check out our... And a reminder about next Monday's session. Daylight savings time will have happened. Where I am, this means I will be at GMT -7. So this means wherever you are in the world, I might be an hour later in your day. I believe Europe does not catch up until the end of March. So if you're in an EMEA time zone, like GMT or GMT +1 Central European time, you might be an hour offset. I can't fix this. I'm sorry. We'll just be off for a few weeks. So please keep that in mind. I will also call out, I am planning out the next session. It will be the ACP-120. That will start in late March, early April. Be on the lookout for that. And I've also got a small group going. Going as well. Feel free to reach out to me if you want more information on that. You can always find me on LinkedIn. You can shoot me an email. You can find me in Discord. You can go to the community forums. You can, I say Slack me, but we don't have a communal Slack. But if you need help, if you have questions, reach out to me. But please keep engaging. These sessions are not enough for you to pass the exam. Period, full stop. You do need hands-on experience. You need to take those quizzes. You need to talk to other people. You need to make mistakes and play around with it. So please make sure you're doing that. I'll drop one last poll. I think I grabbed all our questions, but curious what y'all thought of today's session. And Michelin Gantry, thank you so much for sharing your experience using this tool. That really helped me understand how to use it. And I think it was John for asking, pointing things out, more information about board source, etc. And then who was asking really great questions? RJ, about the projects feature. Thank you all for jumping into chat and engaging. That's what makes this a lot more interesting for folks. I'm happy to sit here and talk, but as other people engage, it brings more to it. So thank you for sharing your expertise and your ideas. Otherwise, folks, thank you so much for joining me. We've only got 3 sessions left, 8, 9, and 10. So 3 more weeks of this before maybe a week break so I can recuperate, and then we get on to the ACP-110. But thank you so much for joining me. Check out our sponsor, check out the links, hit the thumbs up, do the YouTube thing, and have a great Monday wherever you are. Monday, it's one day closer to Monday. On that note, have a great day.